So 11 days from now, I'm going to be celebrating my 4th wedding anniversary. I married late in life, but extremely well. I married this beautiful woman who's on screen there and over there. Kelly is intelligent, funny, self-sufficient. She doesn't need me at all, which is great. For about the first year of our relationship, Kelly and I lived about an hour apart, and we had cell phones and Facebook Messenger, so we were able to grow close really quickly. And somewhere in the first bit of that courtship, I started to feel really unsettled and even scattered. I wouldn't always pick up the phone right away when I saw her name coming through on the phone, and I started replying to her messages with shorter and shorter responses. And my breath was strange when I spoke on the phone to her. And I didn't know at that time right away what was going on for me. I couldn't figure out why I would seem to be holding back from this amazing relationship. But with a little help, I was able to dig down and say simply to Kelly one night when we were on the phone, "I'm scared. I'm scared." Now, Kelly could have done any number of things. She could have said any number of different things in that moment. She could have made up that I was clearly unwilling to commit or pursue a more powerful and intimate relationship with her, and that she'd better bail before I broke up with her. She could have decided that there was something wrong with her, that she needed to fix or change in order to be in a relationship with me. She might have decided that her role was to play the nurse or the mother and try and calm me down and soothe me and take away my fear. But Kelly didn't do any of those things. I said, "I'm scared." And she said, "Okay. Okay." That one word had this powerful effect on me. My clench of fear turned into a flood of relief. Kelly, in that moment, was willing to accept me exactly as I was, and she didn't feel any need to change or alter or fix me. And I felt so happy that I didn't have to change or hide anything about me to be in a relationship with Kelly. She changed me without trying to change me. I fell much more deeply in love with Kelly because she was essentially leaving me alone. And I've come to believe that we can all create more powerful relationships if we just stop trying to change one another so much. And I think that by letting go of the desire to change one another, we can actually have a powerful impact and maybe even change the world. Now, I don't make this bold claim just based on this one experience with my wife. I've got 35 years of experiences working with people in the outdoors, in the mountains, on the rivers, in the deserts. And for the last 8 years, I've been working with the Boys to Men Mentoring Network, where we do rites of passage and long-term mentoring for teenage boys. And what we found at Boys to Men is that the more we try and fix or alter or advise our young men, the more resistant they become. They get really defended and they stop coming to our events. So what we've trained ourselves to do is something we're calling Validate in Place. Validate in Place is a coaching and communication technique that essentially treats whatever somebody shows up with, whatever one of our teens shows up with, as valid, valuable, real, important, interesting, and not to be fixed or altered. So what this does for us is helps create a relationship with these young men that continually builds. And what we believe it does for them is it keeps their field of possibility open. Because rather than being defensive, rather than feeling like they have to defend their stance, they're open and vulnerable with us. Validate in Place relies on a few different psychological concepts that we've kind of cherry-picked from around, but the basic one that I want to talk about today is this idea that everybody has the same set of basic fundamental psychological needs. And those basic fundamental needs are safety, belonging, control, freedom, and fun. These were enumerated by William Glasser, but I think they would have ended up in the Declaration of Independence if Jefferson had had the time and the ink, right? These look like unalienable rights, right? There's nothing wrong with these. There's nothing selfish about them. They're valuable things that every human being should have. Safety, belonging, control, freedom, and fun. So a little bit further, we look at how emotions arise when needs are either being met or unmet, right? So joy shows up when a teen's desire for need for belonging or connection is met. Anger shows up when a teen believes that his sense of freedom or safety is being threatened. So what that means is that none of those, because those emotions are linked to these fundamentally basic needs, there's nothing reprehensible or incomprehensible about those emotions. It might be hard for a mentor or an adult to deal with a teen's rage or joy or anger, but there's nothing confusing about that. It's just a response to their reality at that time. That's what we're training ourselves to believe as adults. Furthermore, we believe that behavior is just an attempt, all behavior is just an attempt to get a basic need met, right? So a slammed door might be an attempt to get some autonomy, right? An inappropriate joke might be a way to try and get a little fun or belonging. Crossed arms and a scowl might be a way for a teen to just get a little freedom or safety. So that's what we work with at Boys to Men Mentoring Network. We do our best to accept whatever comes at us, value it, maybe even praise it a little bit, validate it right in place, so that the teens end up with that wide sphere and we don't constrain them or put them in a box. It's not always easy. I'll be the first to admit that. I have the heartbreaking and wonderful task of once a week sitting in a circle of boys at the local juvenile justice center where they're undergoing drug treatment. And for the first week or two that we meet with these boys, they're definitely close and constrained with their truth. They don't necessarily trust us right away, and that's okay, that makes sense. I recognize that. That's trying to maintain that sense of safety, that sense of autonomy. But we have designed a question that we use early on to kind of hurdle over that hesitancy. So we ask every young man in that circle, what is your dream? What do you want to be doing in 5 years? Be as detailed as possible. Tell us about the house you live in. What color is it? Do you have pets? What are their names? What do you do at work? Do you have family? What do you do in the community for fun, and how do you serve your community? And we ask for this level of detail because we want to activate their brains around positive, forward, and creative thinking. And we ask those questions about community and family because we want to activate values around belonging and service. So about 18 months ago, we had a new young man in our circle that we'll call Franklin. It's not his real name. Franklin was a 15-year-old, well, he's 16 now, baby-faced kid, still can't grow a mustache, scrawny, but he had this sort of overconfident, cocksure posture. And when the question came around to Franklin about his ideal life, what he wanted to be doing in 5 or 10 years, Franklin said, I'm going to be running drugs for the Mexican cartels. I'm going to be driving a big car and carrying a gun. Now that is not the answer that I or any caring adult want to hear from a 15-year-old who can't even grow a mustache. And I felt like the back of my head was on fire when I heard this. But I maintained eye contact, but all that time in my head are these thoughts. This is terrible, this is antisocial, this is illegal, this is violent. This is not a dream for this child, this is a nightmare. This isn't even going to work out for him. This kid's so scrawny and small, he's not going to survive this nightmare. He's going to end up in jail at best. More likely he's going to end up dead. I wanted to shake him, I wanted to yell at him. I at least wanted to be able to turn my face away from that nightmare. But I also really wanted Franklin to trust me, to trust us. his sphere of ability to change and grow, to remain wide open. I didn't want to box him in. So I tried to ignore the fire on the back of my head, and I maintained eye contact with him. And I said to Franklin, okay. Now some of you may be thinking right now, well, that was a really irresponsible, non-adult thing to say. You cannot validate a child's desire to become a gun-toting cartel lieutenant. That's not all right. And I get it. But what I'm proposing here is a different way for us to be with one another and a different way to support one another. Think about it in your own life. Think about the last time you tried to talk sense into a friend who was making a terrible relationship choice or making a really bad career move. How well did talking sense work out for you? Did you get a whole lot of friendship back and a lot of gratitude? Oh, thank you for telling me how I should behave. When somebody tells you, don't be so sad, or don't be angry, or there's no need to be so afraid, does that actually help you be less sad or angry or afraid? No. So, well, all right, it happened. Right. So what we find and what I find is that most of the ways, even in the most loving relationships, most of the ways that we choose to try and support and help one another set up this hierarchical and even dysfunctional relationship. And at Boys to Men, we call that dysfunctional relationship frapping. FRAP stands for fixing, rescuing, advising, and projecting. Fixing is very common, right? You show up with some problem or issue, and your friend immediately starts trying to fix it, trying to make it better. And that might be helpful, but it also bulldozes over any solutions of your own, any authentic thoughts that might have been bubbling up just below the surface. Rescuing is when we try and minimize the emotional charge of the problem. You know, there, it's going to be okay, don't worry about it, your sister didn't mean to be that way to you, don't feel so bad. And again, that invalidates the truth of that emotion. Advising is really similar to fixing. Somebody shows up with a problem, and immediately I jump in with all of the 15 different ways that I've done that in the past. Let me tell you the best way to make that work. Projecting is when we make up that what somebody just said or brought to us is about us and not about them. All of these frapping behaviors do that. All of them take the power and the autonomy and the attention away from the initial person, right? So they set up that hierarchical relationship. Look, frapping's really common. You're probably imagining and remembering stories of your own experience, either as a frappee or a frapper. And one other name for frapping is just family, right? It's just family. So it's very common, and but like I said, what it does is it sets up that hierarchical relationship and takes power away. And when folks don't have power and autonomy, I know when I don't feel like I have power and autonomy and support and attention, I become defended and scared. And when I'm defended and scared, my focus narrows down. I'm shifting from this big, wonderful lump of gray matter up here into my lizard brain a little bit. And when I'm defended and scared, my ability to be creative and hopeful and forward-thinking is very limited. What if instead, for each of us, in all of our interactions as much as possible, we listened to what somebody had to say and held it non-judgmentally and even a little neutrally, and just waited to see what showed up next? What we find is that when we do that, we create a little room of empathy and safety for one another. And out of that place, out of that quiet, spacious place, that's where we see time and time again the most unique and unexpected solutions emerge. And I believe that that is what's going to help change the world. waiting for those unique and unexpected solutions to show up, especially from our youth. So we need to go back to talk a little bit more about Franklin, don't we? So when I said okay to Franklin, I saw something shift for him. His eyes got a little bit wider, and his shoulders dropped just a little bit, and I took a risk. I decided to ask some more questions. I said, Franklin, what is it that you like about the idea of being a drug runner? He said, the money. I said, oh, the money. And what does that get you? Some freedom, some fun? And he's like, no, man. With that money, I can take care of myself. I'm like, oh, gotcha. You want to be able to take care of yourself. And when I reflected that back to him non-judgmentally, he softened even more. And then he told me the truth underneath his truth. Yeah, he said, and with that money, I can take care of my mama. She works really hard, and I worry about her. Franklin didn't want to be a drug lieutenant. Franklin wanted to take care of his mama. His deepest need was for connection and belonging with her. I believe that because we validated Franklin's first statement, that he understood that we were willing to be non-judgmental witnesses and allies to him, interested in his whole personhood, his whole complexity, no matter how painful. And that because we did that work, he shared a little bit of openness, a little bit of vulnerability, and he told us the truth underneath the truth. So again, what would it be like if we could all do that for one another? What would it be like if we could all insist on being non-judgmental witnesses and allies for one another? And wait for the truth underneath the truth to emerge. Wait for the creativity. Wait for the hopefulness. Wait for the joy. So we've kept track of Franklin over the last 18 months. And his life is a series of successes and setbacks. But what he's told us most recently, the last time we spoke to him, his plan now is to join the Marines. And when he comes back home, to open a boxing gym for the kids in his community so that they have something to do besides drink and get in trouble. So what's next? What's next? We spent the last few hundred years studying psychology and psychiatry and all of this emotional literacy and emotional resilience, communication techniques. Now we have an opportunity to combine all of that into a technique, a daily practice, where we can be there for one another and promote that creativity and hope. So, I've shared my dream with you. You've listened. You all know what to say next, right? Okay. Thank you so much.